Lucasfilm and Disney are viewing Star Wars Episode 9 as a course correction. What exactly does that mean, and how will J.J. Abrams handle the task of setting Star Wars on a new path? Well, we are going to break it all down. This is the Nerdy News Rundown. Let's get you filled in. Now, before we get into this news, I need to shout out Justin May, who got the nerd card question correct in my Star Wars video from yesterday. You definitely know your stuff when it comes to the Old Republic, Justin, so shout out to you. And we will, of course, do another nerd card question at the end of this video. Now, I want to say too, I know this is kind of a sensitive topic for some people, but I am going to talk about why I think this news is completely positive. No matter what side of this weird Star Wars fan divide you are on, this is good news, and I want to explain why. So let's start by talking about where this news actually comes from. There was a story that broke late Friday night about how J.J. Abrams was looking for a new mega deal. Now, this story that we're talking about here really isn't about the mega deal, but it's kind of interesting. He's actually looking to get some huge lump sum of money and get a contract with a specific studio, and he'll sort of stay there at that studio until the end of his career, I think. Think of it as like a sports deal for like a really, really good athlete to sort of stay with one team for the rest of the time. I think that's what they're going for. Either way, buried within that story was this small little line about how Lucasfilm views Episode 9 as a course correction. Now, for many, we view this as the first time that we've ever had like official word from Lucasfilm or Disney or anybody that they're acknowledging that Star Wars is in sort of a rough spot. Now, technically, you could look to the comments made by Bob Iger when he was talking about the Star Wars slowdown, and you could say, well, those are technically him talking about Star Wars being in sort of a bad spot and how they need to change things and make it more ceremonial, and I tend to agree, but this is the first time we've ever heard anything like course correction when it's linked to Episode 9. Now, fans tend to take this stuff and run it across like party lines when it comes to whether or not we like Star Wars and Disney Star Wars, or we hate Disney Star Wars and we don't like what's going on. But as I said before, this is actually good news no matter where you stand as a Star Wars fan. And let me kind of get into why. The Last Jedi was a departure from what we would call like the normal formula for Star Wars. And I think even if you like the film like I do, you can acknowledge that. You can be like, yeah, no, this was kind of a departure from our normal type of Star Wars. And I think the point I'm trying to make here is either way, it was going to return to form. Either way, Episode 9 was going to sort of bring it back home and strike very similar notes to older Star Wars movies. And I mean, now that we've got JJ being the one that will close it up, I think it's just a perfect fit, right? He begins it, he ends it, we have this departure, but really a lot can change as far as the perception of this entire trilogy depending on how it ends. And I think that was sort of always known by Lucasfilm and Disney, and I think it was always going to go back to sort of a return to form, if you will, and I just think that that's normal. Now, on the other side of that, it's not like they're going to drastically change what's going on with these characters or with this story. I mean, they really can't. It's sort of been set in motion. We got 2 or 3 parts already. And even though there's a lot of mystery, and The Last Jedi ends in a way where there's a multitude of possibilities for these characters, overall, the arcs that they are on are not going to drastically change. Sure, JJ might give Rey a lineage, but I don't think that it's going to drastically change what is important for her character. It could add a little flavor, which might be all right, but overall, they're not going to like change the Rey character. They're not going to change the Kylo Ren character. And so if you're concerned that this idea of course correction means a lot of changes to the story so far, I don't think you should be that concerned. However, there are things that they can fix when it comes to the Rey and the Kylo Ren character. And I think just in general, like characters develop over time. We want to see them grow. And I always point to the Ahsoka example. I mean, she started out as kind of like this whiny little girl. And by the end of the Clone Wars, all Star Wars fans love this character. She's badass, she's strong, she has her own type of thing going on, and a lot of the development that we saw in that long form of the show was really important to getting fans to like buy into that character. And even though we haven't exactly had that with Kylo Ren and Rey, I think that they are going to evolve quite a bit. I mean, let me give you an example. What if at the start of Episode 9, it's sort of a thing within the Resistance that Rey is constantly training. She's constantly working on her Force abilities, series. She's constantly studying the books that she got from Luke Skywalker and Ahch-To, and she's constantly working with her Jedi, the new Jedi Order, almost to an obsessive degree, to the point where it's getting on the nerves of the other characters. I think, you know, doing that and sort of explaining more about what the Cosmic Force is actually doing to her, you know, which I always talk about is some of the stuff that's in the ancillary material, whether it's the comics or in the Jason Fry novelization of The Last Jedi. If some of that stuff makes its way into the film and is explicitly spelled out, it would go a long way to getting people to be able to relate to the Rey character, forgive some of the seeming flaws in her character and her character development. And similarly with Kylo, I mean, what if Kylo is like completely put together? He's constantly like meditating within the Force. He's strong, evil, but not emotional in the way that we have seen. I mean, not only would that show character development, which is a really important thing for audiences to latch onto, but it would seemingly fix a lot of the issues that people have with Kylo Ren. I mean, I always talk about this, but it's this anime effect. A lot of the heroes in anime, the male heroes at least, they start out as like really adolescent, whiny people, and their development takes them to a place where they are like badass, stoic, put together. And so I think we could see something like that happen with Kylo Ren's character, and these little types of things could go a long way to getting audiences to sort of appreciate these characters more. I mean, this is what happens to Luke Skywalker. Luke Skywalker's whiny as hell in A New Hope, and by the end of Return of the Jedi, we're like, wow, this dude is not only really strong and powerful and badass, but the fact that he chooses not to fight is all the more significant because he is a badass. I also feel like overall the tone of this movie has to really return to form. In fact, I did a video a while back about retcons that J.J. Abrams might make to The Last Jedi. I will link that video in the description because I think it's a really good sort of summary of my thoughts on the things that should be changed in Episode 9. But one of those things is the tone. I think it needs to be serious. We need to have a lot of weight here. We can have humor and Star Wars humor, but we need to sort of stay away from the Marvel humor. And so getting back to a familiar Star Wars tone, I think would also go a long way to course correct for Disney. We also know that Star Wars Episode 9 is being billed as the end of the Skywalker saga. I mean, this is a huge deal. I think it's brilliant marketing, but if they can actually put an end cap to this time period within the Star Wars mythos that has to do with the Skywalkers, I mean, that would be really amazing and potentially even recontextualize prior films. I've talked a lot about this recently, but once again, I think this would be a great way to sort of course correct for the brand of Star Wars. And finally, the real thing here, the thing that Disney really needs to focus on, and the reason that if they accomplish this, it will be great for all fans, is that these films need to feel ceremonial. They need to feel like a really big mythic deal every time one of them happens. I mean, I think we sort of have gotten away from that a bit, and we really need to focus back on that. This happens from the mise-en-scène of the film, but also really the context of the film. I mean, we need to talk about the Force. We need to talk about the Cosmic Force, the Living Force. We need to talk about the Chosen One. We need to talk more about these things within the movie, which I think they will. Closing up the Skywalker saga, it kind of makes sense that that's the way that they would go. And so I think overall, guys, no matter where you stand on the current state of Star Wars, this idea of a course correction can be looked at in a very positive light. So, I mean, that's the news that's out there. I wanted to cover it here. It's teetering on the type of content that I said I wouldn't make here anymore on the channel, but it was a big news story and I wanted to talk about it. I almost did a video late Friday night talking about it, but I kind of wanted to collect my thoughts. And so these are my thoughts. Now, let us know, like, what do you think about this? Your opinion matters. I want to know. Drop a comment. Do you think this is a good idea to course correct? Do you think this is a bad idea? I'd love to hear your thoughts about it either way. So let me know in the comment section below. Now, before we get out of here, let's check that nerd card. I want to know, what is the actual name of the species that we call the space whales? These were the creatures that were in Star Wars Rebels. They have a really cool little part with Thrawn and Ezra. Hoping to see that story completed one day by Timothy Zahn. But either way, the question remains, what is the name of the space whales in the Star Wars universe? Answer that question in the comment section below. As I always say, I hope you are having an awesome and nerdy day, and I will see you in the next video.